Here we are once again with another Chef Knives to Go quick look product review. I'm Steve Gamache, and what we have this time is the Kohetsu Aogami or Blue number 2 Shinano Gyuto 240mm knife. So this line of knives has a 3-layer construction. The hardcore center cutting edge steel is Aogami Blue Paper number 2 reactive high carbon steel. Heat treats around 62 Rockwell on that core steel. And this has a soft stainless steel cladding covering either side of that harder core cutting edge steel. And a little hard to tell, but I don't think the cladding wraps around the top. It looks like you can see the layers, although with the sanding they've done, it's a little difficult to see that. But so you've got stainless on the rest of the knife, and then you've got the edge, cutting edge, and that section there peeking out is reactive, so it makes maintenance a little bit easier. The weight and dimensions on these can vary just a little bit from knife to knife. This particular one is 190 grams or 6.7 ounces, and the edge length from the tip all the way to the back of the heel is about 9.6 inches, 244 millimeters. That'll vary just a little bit. Overall length is about 15.5 inches, and then these tend to be kind of thick coming out of the handle, but then they thin out pretty well fairly quickly. So this particular one, I got about 4 millimeters at the spine thickness back at the back of the heel, and then it went down about 2.1 halfway down the blade. And then we don't have a ton of distal taper or thinning of the spine as we go, but it starts to thin out more when you hit the grind of the blade. And you can it's not exactly 100%, but fairly close to that demarcation of finish is where the grind starts coming down towards the edge. It's not really a hard shoulder, as you might suspect from this visual, but it's a little bit more of a gradual curved contour towards the edge. But it does thin out pretty good at the very, very end, but it's not a super thin tip overall. So you got a little bit of meat back there. Here is the edge profile. Again, not super wispy thin, so this will have a little more meat behind the edge for that trade-off of a little bit more robustness for some of that thinness. The grind's really well done on these, though. You can just feel a kind of a gradual thinning as you get down towards the edge, so it's a nice grind. The height on these is pretty generous, so it's about 49 millimeter at the back. You've got a fairly thin neck, so that gives you a lot of clearance for the cutting board for your fingers. The handle is pretty much kind of a standard handle we see a lot. It's an octagonal ambidextrous walnut handle with a black peckerwood ferrule, and this has a nice good tight glue up between the tang and the handle, so nicely done there. Always check that if you have any gaps, put some kind of sealer on that to seal it up so you don't get moisture back there. Circumference on this particular handle is about 73-ish millimeters where the two materials meet. And you can see a generous neck here, at least on this one. So that gives you a good spot to put your finger there. Whoops, there we go. Put your finger there for a pinch grip. So you got a lot of space there for a nice pinch grip. Balance point on this is right about there. So the blade has a little bit of mass to it. The handle has a little bit of mass to it, so that balances out pretty nicely. It's going to be slightly forward of a pinch grip from my pinch grip, but that gives you a little bit of a weight forward balance to kind of get some meat behind the blade for some of your cutting tasks, so not necessarily a bad thing whatsoever. This is 6.7 ounces, so it's not the lightest one, and it does have that little bit of feel to it, but it gives you a pretty nimble feel yet as well. So it's a pretty big blade. The beauty shot, we got to do that here. Let's get that figured out. It's always hard to get the exact shot we want, but we'll try that. So let's take a look at the finish. It's a nicely done finish on these. They've got a kind of a horizontal sanded finish on there, which is nice because as you clean the knife and dry it, you tend to go this way with the blade. So what that does is helps to hide any scratches that may occur on that finish. And so that's a nice feature about that type of horizontal brushed, I call it a brushed finish. There's other names for it, but it's a nice feature. You can see probably a sandblasted type Kasumi, faux Kasumi finish here coming on the grind down towards the edge, and then there's your core steel peeking out from the cladding where the line of demarcation exists. This has, it looks like hand engraved. It's a really nice job because this is small kanji, and so they used a small chisel here, but that's hand engraved kanji there. You can feel it with your fingers, and it's quite the job because that's not easy. That is really small. And then this looks to be embossed, but it's very cleanly done. So nice job there. The spine has been polished a little bit and sanded. A little bit of relief on the corners, enough to make it not sharp. And then we've got some relief and some cleanup on the corners of the choil right here. So this is comfortable out of the box. The edge I got on this out of the box is maybe 5 or 6 out of 10. At least this sample, I'd probably want to give it a good thorough sharpening. And that'll basically reveal what this steel can do. This steel will get very, very sharp, and the edge retention is pretty nice on it if you do your job and put a good clean edge on it. The stiffness of the blade is pretty good. It's quite stiff, so this has a lot of confidence on the cutting board. And what else here? Let's look at our cutting board. Speaking of that, let's see how it looks on there. So here we go. So not a ton of flat, and these will vary just a little bit from knife to knife, but this gives you a general idea of this maker. So I've got a little bit of a back belly there. That's actually kind of, it could be my cutting board, but it's a little bit of a bump there that could be cleaned up. And you could do that actually. It's not that hard to clean up an edge profile with minor adjustments like that. I've got a pretty good belly towards the tip, so this thing will get really high. That's higher than most knives I do. I've done a lot. I'm still going. So that tip is kind of swept up pretty good. So can you rock this? Oh yeah. Heck yeah, not a problem. This will rock like a champ. I don't want to cut myself here. I'm in an awkward angle the way this is vertical shooting down, so my arm's like way over there. But yeah, so this will rock really nice. Push, pull, cut, and glide cutting. Not necessarily a pure chopper, but it does support pretty wide variety of techniques. And that a little bit more aggressive belly towards the tip will give a real nice rock on these. So, and a longer knife too, when you rock it, you don't necessarily have to lift the handle as much and do a lot of high handle pumping on it because it's longer. You get that mechanical advantage of the length. So there are a number of advantages of longer blades. One of them being, if you want to rock it, you don't have to crank that handle up and down as much, so it's more efficient. You also, on a longer blade, as you use areas of the blade, you can pick areas that maybe you don't use as much and they're sharper still, so you can kind of move to different areas of the blade that might still retain some sharpness and kind of use up the sharpness of the blade at different points before you go ahead and throw it on the stones or do a touch-up on it. So a lot of advantages to a longer blade. So this is a nice package. This is the Kohetsu Aogami or Blue No. 2 Shinano Gyuto 240mm knife.